Quick experiment. Right now, you are completely convinced you make your own decisions. Nobody's whispering in your ear. Nobody's got a hand up the back of your shirt like a puppet. Except, kind of. The way you choose friends, vote, shop, even fall in love, is being quietly steered by mental shortcuts you've never once been formally introduced to. They don't ask permission, they don't announce themselves, they just drive, while you sit in the passenger seat insisting you're the one holding the wheel. Today, we're opening the hood on 9 of them. The biases quietly wired into every human brain on this planet, including yours, including mine. No refunds, no exceptions. This isn't about proving you're broken, it's about finally meeting the operating system you've been running, completely unpatched, since the day you were born. And stick with me until the end, because the last one is the one that's very possibly running interference on this exact video, right now, as you watch it. Let's start with the one running quietly underneath almost every other bias on this list, the ringleader. You post something, 10 comments come in, 9 are lovely. One says, essentially, this is bad and you should feel bad. Guess which one is still open in a mental tab at 11 p.m. while the other 9 have been fully garbage collected? That's negativity bias. Our tendency to hand bad experiences way more psychological airtime than good ones, even when they're the exact same size. One sharp word can outweigh an hour of praise. One mistake can quietly erase a week of decent work, at least in how it feels, which, unfortunately, is the only currency your brain actually accepts. Here's why you're wired like this. For most of human history, missing good news cost you almost nothing. Missing bad news, a rustle in the grass, a stranger's tone shifting, weather turning, could cost you everything. So somewhere back down the line, a trade got made, and not a subtle one. Scan hard for danger, barely bother with reward, because the ones who shrugged off warning signs didn't stick around long enough to have opinions about anything. You are, quite literally, descended from the anxious ones. The ones who assumed the worst and checked twice. Somewhere in your family tree there is a very jumpy, very alive ancestor to thank for this. Knowing this doesn't turn the bias off. No amount of understanding this has ever stopped anyone from rereading one bad comment 4 times. But it does let you ask a better question. Is this actually the most important information in the room, or is this just very old software doing the only trick it knows? The second one is sneakier, and arguably more dangerous, because it never announces itself as a bias. It shows up dressed as just being right. Confirmation bias is our habit of hunting down, noticing, and remembering anything that agrees with what we already believe, while quietly, politely, showing everything else the door. You're sure a certain diet works, so every success story becomes proof, while the friend who quit and gained it all back gets quietly filed under "did it wrong." You decide a certain politician is dishonest, and suddenly every headline is a personal vindication tour. You decide you're bad at math, and every hard problem confirms the theory, while every easy one gets filed under "luck," case closed. The belief showed up first. The evidence was just hired afterward to agree with it. Why would something this stubborn get built in? Because for most of our history, being fast and consistent beat being accurate. A tribe that kept relitigating which berries were poisonous wasted time it didn't have. Certainty was efficient. It just also happened to be wrong fairly often, which was, apparently, an acceptable trade-off at the time. The fix isn't to stop having beliefs. That ship has sailed and also isn't possible. It's to occasionally ask yourself the one question almost nobody asks. What would actually change my mind? If the honest answer is nothing, ever, under any circumstances, congratulations. That's not conviction. That's just the bias, wearing your voice. Now here's one that has shaped more of human history, and honestly, more human cruelty than almost anything else on this list. In-group bias is our tendency to instantly like people we file under us, and to distrust, dismiss, or straight-up dehumanize anyone we file under them. It shows up in something as harmless as trusting a stranger a little more because they're wearing the same team's jersey, and it quietly shows up in who you hire, who you date, and who you actually believe, because we default to trusting people who feel familiar, who went to the same school, who like the same things we do. It also shows up in something as catastrophic as entire wars. For most of human history, the group was the entire difference between surviving the week and not. A human alone out there rarely lasted long, so our brains got exquisitely, brutally efficient at one question: is this person one of mine or a threat to mine? There was no time for nuance. Nuance is slow, and slow got you eaten. The tragedy is that this circuitry never got the memo that the world changed. It fires just as hard over a sports rivalry, a difference in accent, or someone's political yard sign, as it once fired over an actual invading tribe with actual spears. You can't delete this one, but you can catch it mid-fire, in that half-second flash of suspicion towards someone who is, in every way that actually matters, exactly like you. That half-second of noticing is the entire difference between being run by the instinct and just watching it drive past. Here's a strange one, and you've absolutely felt it, even if nobody ever gave it a name for you. Losing $100 feels worse than gaining $100 feels good, not a little worse. Research puts it at roughly twice as bad, which is a genuinely unfair exchange rate your own brain is running on you. This is loss aversion, and it quietly explains far more of your life decisions than you'd probably like to admit. It's why you stay in a job, a relationship, or a group chat long after it stopped serving you. Not because leaving is actually worse, but because losing what you have feels heavier than gaining what you might get, even when the math clearly disagrees. This makes brutal sense if you think about it. An early human with a stockpile of food loses that stockpile, and that's potentially the whole game. Starvation. Gain the same amount extra? Nice, sure, but rarely a life or death upgrade. Losses were existential. Gains were a bonus round. So we ended up fearing losing far more than we ever hoped for gaining. The problem is that almost nothing in modern life is actually existential in that way anymore. Leaving a mediocre job will not, in fact, end with you eaten by a wolf. But the alarm bell doesn't know that. It just rings exactly as loud either way. The question worth asking, every time you feel that tug to stay purely out of fear of losing something, is simple. Am I protecting something I actually value here, or am I just obeying a smoke alarm built for a world that still had actual starvation in it? This next one is the quiet reason so many of us are unnecessarily hard on ourselves. And it's got a real gift for making the past look far more obvious than it ever actually was. Hindsight bias is our tendency, after something happens, to insist we knew it all along, even when, honestly, we very much did not. A relationship ends, and suddenly, every warning sign was blinking in neon. A stock crashes, and suddenly, it was obviously going to happen, according to the same person who owned shares of it yesterday. Your brain does this because it's addicted to a clean story. A messy, uncertain past is uncomfortable to hold, so your memory quietly edits it, smoothing out how unsure you actually felt in the moment, and swapping in a tidier version where you basically had it figured out the whole time. Your memory, it turns out, is a co-writer with a strong bias toward flattering rewrites. This seems harmless until you notice what it does to self-blame. I should have seen this coming is almost always hindsight bias wearing a guilt costume, judging your past self, who had none of the information you have now, by the standards of your present self, who has all of it and is somehow still not impressed. The kinder, more accurate question isn't, why didn't I know? It's, what did I actually know, at the time, with what I actually had? Almost always, the honest answer is far more forgiving than the tidy story hindsight is trying to sell you. Here's one that anyone who's ever bought a car has felt without knowing its name. The salesman says $45,000. You negotiate down to $38,000. You leave feeling like you won something. You did not win anything. You just got anchored. Anchoring is our tendency to lock onto the first number we see and judge every number after it relative to that one, instead of asking what the thing is actually worth in the first place. This one isn't really about survival so much as arithmetic laziness with good intentions. Your brain was never built to calculate true value from scratch every single time. That's slow, and slow was rarely affordable, so it learned to grab the first available reference point and measure everything else against it. Efficient, fast, also extremely easy to weaponize. Every salesperson, every real estate listing, every was $200 now $89 sticker on a shirt you don't need is just quietly setting your anchor for you before you've had a single independent thought about what the thing is worth. The move is simple, if slightly annoying to actually do. Before you walk into any negotiation, salary, house, second-hand sofa, decide your own number first. Whoever says the first number in the room usually wins it. Make sure it's you. You will, statistically, almost certainly never be in a plane crash. You will, statistically, have a much harder time avoiding heart disease. And yet one of these keeps people awake on turbulent flights, and the other one gets ignored at dinner. That's the availability heuristic, our habit of judging how common or dangerous something is by how easily an example comes to mind, rather than by what's actually likely. This made sense once. A vivid story about a lion at the watering hole needed to be remembered instantly and taken very seriously, because it might only need to happen to you once. A slow, boring risk, bad food habits, minor daily wear and tear, didn't come with a dramatic story attached, so it didn't get the same urgent flag. Vivid and rare got filed as dangerous. Common and quiet got filed as fine, probably. Modern media is, essentially, an uninterrupted highlight reel of the rarest, most dramatic disasters on Earth, delivered to your pocket daily. So we end up terrified of sharks and shootings and plane crashes, and strangely calm about the diabetes, the car crash on the regular commute, the things that actually, quietly, get most of us in the end. The question worth asking when something suddenly feels very dangerous is this common, or is it just memorable? Those are not the same question, even though your brain is convinced they are. And here's the one quietly running underneath nearly every plan you've ever made. Usually the one responsible for you being 20 minutes late right now, in general, as a philosophy. Optimism bias is our tendency to believe bad things are statistically less likely to happen to us than to everyone else. Smokers who know the risks and are simply certain they'll be the exception, drivers who've seen the statistics and are positive they, personally, will not be one of them. All of us, scheduling a project, quietly assuming it will take less time and cost less money than it, historically, always does. This one may have earned its keep, though. Without some baseline delusion that things would probably work out, our ancestors might never have taken the risks survival occasionally demanded, leaving the group, trying the unfamiliar berry, wandering past the next ridge. A species of pure realists might have taken one look at the odds and stayed home forever. So optimism bias isn't purely a flaw, it's part of what got us out the door. The cost is that it also leaves us chronically, almost comically unprepared for the ordinary, statistically unremarkable bad things that happen to literally everyone eventually, including, it turns out, us. The goal isn't to kill your optimism. It's to occasionally borrow someone else's clear eyes and ask, if this were happening to a stranger and not to me, what would I actually tell them to prepare for? And now, the one nobody sees coming, because, by design, you can't see it coming for yourself. You've spent the last 12 minutes getting remarkably good at spotting these 8 biases. In your uncle, your co-worker, that one friend who won't stop talking about his diet, but you, personally, watching this right now, you're the objective one, the reasonable one, the exception in every room you walk into. That quiet certainty has a name too, the bias blind spot. And here's why it's so stubborn. Spotting a bias in someone else is cheap. It's just pattern matching, outward, at a safe distance. Spotting it in yourself means turning that same suspicion inward onto your own conclusions, which is expensive, uncomfortable, and something that was never once rewarded. A tribe member who constantly doubted their own judgment moved slower and looked weak. Confidence in your own read of a situation was an asset, whether or not the read was actually correct. Which means this is the bias that protects all the other biases. It's the reason you nodded along for the last 12 minutes, picturing everyone you know except the one person actually watching the screen. So here's the one question worth carrying out of this video. If a stranger reviewed the tape of your last big decision, Would they call it reasoned, or would they spot the exact shortcut you just spent 14 minutes learning the name of? None of these 9 biases are a character flaw, and none of them are proof you're broken. They're inherited tools, built under millions of years of pressure, for a world of scarce food, real predators, and small tribes where one wrong guess could end your afternoon permanently. The problem is simply this: that world is mostly gone. The tools somehow are still fully operational and running quietly in the background, like a browser tab you forgot you opened. You cannot delete this software. Believe me, people have tried. But you are the only species that has ever been able to pop the hood and watch it running in real time, to notice the bias in the exact moment it fires, and choose, just this once, to act half a second slower and a little wiser than the instinct is demanding. So, which one of these 9 landed the hardest for you? Which one's been quietly steering something in your life without ever once asking permission? That's worth sitting with, honestly, more than it's worth answering right away. That's not rising above your nature. That is your nature. The one remarkable, slightly absurd part of you that gets to sit there and watch the rest of you think.
If this gave you something to think about, you are exactly who this channel is for. Hit like if it resonated, subscribe so you never miss the next one, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. This is Rise Above Theory. We will see you in the next video.